So I want to talk to you a little bit about AI and truth. And obviously, like right now, you don't even need AI to necessarily fool people because all you need is really you take a video of say Syria, that seems to happen a lot, and then put a headline on it, and that headline puts it in a completely different context and watch it spread. And you know people get away with it all the time. We see that so much of these kinds of things utilized in the Ukraine war and also with Israel Palestine right now. We're seeing a lot of that very false narratives, but a lot of it is just done through contextualization, and that's all you really need. Um, However, with AI, I do think things are going to become dramatically even more difficult to contain because a lot of the reasons why somebody might opt to use an image that's false, aside from telling false stories, also it's about framing it in a very particular way. And we've seen different political campaigns use AI. Um, Both, I believe, Donald Trump and DeSantis have both used it, or at the very least, I think DeSantis definitely their campaign had used it. So we're going to see a lot more of that, in particular with politics and elections, and sort of framing things for things they didn't say. And it's very different to differentiate. So there are things that we can look for right now. Though things are going to get harder. So, for example, we can look at things like, uh, you know, community notes, for example, are a very great tool that if we make sure to read them, because, it means people have sort of done some of that research themselves. But and it's quite good at sort of tracking if things are taken out of context, and people are really good at tracking it back. But we also need to be able to do that ourselves. So something you want to look at is are inconsistencies. An example I would use is, say you have an image and there's somebody carrying something dirty, but then for some reason they're clean. Then it's easier to know that that's maybe a generated image. Things like, six fingers, which we've seen a lot. And AI seems to be terrible at fingers. They also look really weird, like fingers and toes. It doesn't discriminate. It's just bad at both. But eventually, I think that will be cleaned up and it'll be just as good as the rest of the generation. You also see things like very kind of diffuse, blurred backgrounds. So there's certain things we can sort of train ourselves to watch for, look out for when it comes to AI. Um, but you want to like just utilize your critical thinking in general, whether it's AI or real. Um, if something doesn't quite add up, you want to look at the context more. You also want to know, where did this particular image or video originate, or where did this quote originate? I've seen a lot of false quote attributions, completely made up, sometimes made up to physically look like they came from a particular book. So that happens quite a bit. Quotes attributed to particular people, or quotes taken out of context, maybe uh, a little excerpt. There was a video recently, even where the first bit of that video was cut off to make it sound like this person was basically genocidal towards all people of a particular group, when actually that was not the case. So you want to make sure that you have the full context, whether it's text or video or an image. And you also might want to do something very simple like reverse image searches, because that helps you identify when content is taken out of context. And, I think with fact checking organizations, it's like you have I originally thought it was a great idea, and then I found out, a lot of them were creating their own sort of narratives and how they did the fact checking. A lot of them had sort of dubious funding, their own agenda, their own biases. But I don't think you need to throw out the baby with the bathwater, or as that expression goes. I think there are some people who do a really great job. So I think it's a matter of finding um, the right individuals who do fact checking, or the right organizations that do without like some bias or ideological spin or taking things and spinning them into a different context. I think finding those particular individuals, some of whom I'll try to collect maybe a list and share, some of the ones I like. I think that's very, very useful because there are some people who are just really good at searching for data, and they are dedicated to just truth and not some, wherever it might come. I don't even know what their political leanings are. I don't know what they believe. And it's because it's irrelevant to the work that they do. And so I think so I still think it's a valuable resource, and I think critical thinking is just generally something that protects us from a lot of things, but ultimately it's not enough because we're getting to live in a world that's just so much more complicated, so much technologically more advanced. Information, false or real, travels at a very high speed and very difficult to correct. So I do think we need some technological changes and advancements as well if we want to curb um, these falsities. And I'm not talking, I just want to clarify, I'm not talking about opinions because people can have all sorts of opinions, right? They might think something is true and it turns out to be wrong. Those are valid, fair things that I would never want to like censor. But what we want to make sure that when things are absolutely false, right? So for example, if you put out a video of Syria and you say that it's, in Timbuktu and it's not, that should be tagged at the very least. So I think things like that, that's where I want to look at. And so something I would suggest is, for example, with social media platforms, ideally we have them scan images and videos, and when you upload them, and so it can sense that it has or it can detect, not sense, but detect that that it's AI generated, and it would be just automatically tagged as AI generated when it's uploaded. So I think that would be something that would be like a step in the very much the right direction. And I think having maybe some bills that you can have it so that uh, the different companies will have to have some watermarking, something that's already being sort of developed, but too slowly, and it's not implemented very much, or it hasn't been implemented at all, but it's not mandated. But I think if you're a company that creates tools for generating AI images, then you need to also have some kind of watermarking going on into it so that when the social media companies, when you upload it to their server, it can detect it quite easily. Now, is it going to completely prevent bad actors from using AI to spread false messages? No, because there's always going to be loopholes and ways to get around it. I think though it will slow it down significantly if we have mandatory IDing of these images. Um, I think things like I've been sort of I posted about this before on X. I like the idea of being willingly, voluntarily able to provide citations for the content that you're posting, so that people know where your information is coming from, what you're basing on, and it develops trust for you because you're somebody who's willing to cite your sources and allow people to sort of look into where things are coming from, and also it allows a mechanism of correction. So for example, if you cite a source and you say something that isn't, maybe you misinterpreted it, this can be pointed out to you by your readers, and they could say, hey, you got this a little bit wrong, or maybe you misread the statistics. So again, it encourages that mission towards finding truth and making sure that false things stay out or are ID'd. Um, so I think it's really important for us to focus on these things because right now AI isn't even at the surface of the issue yet. Generative AI tools are going to continue growing, going to become more sophisticated, and I think that's going to become a pretty significant problem. And the trouble is, like, what we do is that we get excited about technology, we deploy it, and we forget to address the issues that might come with it. We don't think about these things concurrently. And so the problem is created. Once the problem is created, it's much harder to fix. But things like, for example, the watermarking, and beneath the surface anyways, of, AI generated images and videos, that's something that should have been existing from day one, but it has not. And now we need to, like, create policies, we need to create special tools, change the structure of, existing software. That becomes far more complicated, and it's gonna take a lot of time and a lot of goodwill. Um, but I think we all have this responsibility when we take content, that we share content, that we at least attempt to do our best to verify it, verify its legitimacy and all these other things that I mentioned. And look, occasionally you're going to get things wrong. I just got something wrong recently. Like, that happens. I was able to sort of figure that out fairly quickly, so it didn't really spread. But it's gonna happen. We're gonna make mistakes. We're human. But we should do our best, and we should have structures that allow us to do our best. And so I think that's something that we really need to consider. And I don't think there's, unfortunately, enough attention being paid to it in proportion to the danger that I actually see with all of this, um, which we're really going to be facing. So I think it's very important for both us to develop our own tools, which are critical thinking, discernment, research techniques, skills, understanding data, knowing how to work with data, and searching it up, and having kids learn about it, so that the new generation is fully prepared and equipped, because they're going to grow up in this wild world with full-fledged AI that's not going to have six fingers on a child, that's not going to, blur, or do some weird things, or have glasses that like fit weird, funny. It's going to be really good, and it's going to happen pretty soon. So we need to ensure that we also have systems in place to help protect the truth, essentially, without censorship, right? And I'm talking about verifiable falsities. That's what I want to tackle. And I wanna make sure that we have a world that, somebody I was talking to recently said that, um, in a sense, the algorithms are a form of censorship. When certain things are elevated and certain things are more hidden, then you're actually not providing the full truth. So you want to make sure that the systems you have provide as much as information as possible, to make sure that there is accuracy, and that certain narratives aren't overrepresented and certain information is hidden from you, so that you can make the best decisions about the world that you live in. Because based on the information that we get from social media, from conversations, everything, those are the things that make up our understanding of what's happening in the world. And if we have a false understanding of what's happening in the world, that we don't have a tool that's accurate for analyzing what decisions we need to make, whether it's, what things we wanna buy and where we wanna invest, or which politicians we wanna vote for, which policies we want to support. So all of that is very critical, and I see this being incredibly vulnerable right now. So I think that's something that we really, really need to be thinking of more, and building tools, and I think there should be some forms of regulations just to ensure that those tools exist, even if it means, like, supporting their development. Um, those are my thoughts. As usual, feel free to let me know your own, and, hey, don't hold back. Actually, hold back a little bit, okay? I'm pretty sensitive. Okay.